Remember the Forgotten.
Chapter 9. He of Littleworth. A long cobbled path led Zircon and Aurora into the town of Hillmaven. They followed it along as the trees either side of them became sparser and then disappeared, slowly replaced by the sights of tall and colourful buildings spread out around the low hills and bountiful lakes that marked the outskirts of the town. As the road led them deeper into the centre of the settlement, the two of them became surrounded by these buildings, all grass disappearing under the clean and cobbled streets that seemed to turn and twist, each alley looking as bright and joyful as the main road. Carts rolled on by, carrying scents of fresh bread and fruit, wheeled by people who smiled and waved at everyone they saw. Flowers hung from above doors and windowsills, and the calming sound of trickling water flowed from the river just up ahead that separated the two halves of the town. Above it, a narrow stone bridge arched across the water to connect them, and a tall, historic clock tower rose from its centre for all to see. As Zircon and Aurora gawked and stared at the environment, they walked on until they came to a natural stop in the centre of the bridge, peering over and watching as the flowing water meandered out and slowly shrunk away into the distant hills. "This place is beautiful," Aurora said, smiling to herself. "It really is," agreed Zircon. "Do I truly live here?" As they spoke, a well-dressed man in a brown waistcoat and a feather hat walked past them on the bridge, whistling to himself a merry tune. "Excuse me, sir," Aurora called out to him. "Do you perhaps recognise my friend here?" The man turned his head and looked at Zircon quizzically. "No, I don't think so," he said. "Should I?" "He's a nobleman," explained Aurora. "Are you sure you don't recognise him?" The man gave them a strange look. "Do you want me to recognise him?" "Oh, no, I mean," Aurora fumbled. "Look, the truth is that my friend here has lost his memory, and I'm trying to bring him home. All I know is that he's nobility from Hillmaven." "I see," the man said, giving them a sympathetic look. "Well, I'm afraid I'm quite familiar with the nobility here, and He hesitated, and then his eyes suddenly lit up. "Oh, then you must be Lord Littleworth from the old Barton place." Aurora spoke quickly, looking hopeful. "So you do know him?" "No, I don't think anybody really knows Lord Littleworth," said the man, now smiling at Zircon. "But if you truly are he, then it's a pleasure to meet you." "And where is this Barton place of mine located?" Zircon asked him. "It's lakeside, on the western road," answered the man. "You should find it easily." "Thank you, my good man," Zircon told him. "I'll be sure to repay you for your help once I'm back settled in." The man smiled and gave a curt bow before beginning to whistle once more and finally crossing the bridge. The pair then proceeded to traverse their way through the town. On their way, fetching a fresh loaf of bread from a food stall, they ate as they walked, appreciating the grand view that emerged as they left the centre of town and followed a long, winding road of paved stones through the hills. They passed green meadows and pastures of sheep, ponds swimming with bright orange fish, all under a clear, sunny sky. Soon enough, they had found the old Barton place. It sat on a raised hill just beside a large lake, its surface shimmering almost transcendently in the bright sun. Behind it, a short stretch of wild grass and grazing cows preceded the lush and swaying trees of the forest. The house itself was modest in size, 2 stories and longer than it was wide, but the architecture, an artisan blend of wood and stone, was exquisite. A simple look between the pair affirmed their mutual amazement. Zircon stepped up past the 2 hedges that flanked the approach and put his head to one of the windows beside the door, peering inwards. "I can't see anything," he said. "The sun's too bright." "Let's just head inside," suggested Aurora. Zircon turned to her, lips pursed. "I don't have the keys." Aurora shrugged. "I'm sure we could just force it." "Are you joking?" protested Zircon, eyes widening. "Look at this fine door. No, perhaps we can ask the guards for help. They must have some sort of skeleton key." "What do you mean you won't let me in?" Zircon shouted, slamming his hands on the desk. They stood now in the small wooden room that composed the foyer of the guards' barracks, messy but well furnished, a few flower pots dotted around the room, beside the apparent menagerie of comfy-looking armchairs and tables splayed with cards and dice. "I don't know who the hell you are," one of the seated guards replied, leaning back in his chair. "I'm Lord Littleworth," said Zircon. "I demand that you let me into my home." "You? A lord?" The other guard chuckled. "As if." Zircon's expression became indignant quickly. "How dare you?" "It's true," said Aurora. "He really is Lord Littleworth." The guard shook his head, leaning back and resting it in his hands in a blatant display of disinterest. "The answer is no. We aren't going to help break a couple of random out-of-towners into a nobleman's house." Sighing heavily, the other guard sat up and leant forward, planting his hands firmly on the desk in a stern display of authority. "If you really are Lord Littleworth, and that's a big if, then you best find your keys or someone reputable who can confirm your identity. Otherwise, you ain't getting in. And don't even think about trying to force the door, or we'll throw you in the dungeon, you understand?" "I really hate your type," Zircon scoffed, turning around and walking towards the door. As he stepped out, he turned round a final time. "You'll face consequences for this disrespect. Mark my words." The tavern door squeaked and rattled on its hinges as Aurora pushed it open. It was made of a fine, smooth oak, far more fancy than that of any tavern door she had previously crossed. As she stepped in with Zircon curiously following behind her, the establishment indeed seemed to be in fine business. Between the wide walls, a dozen tidy tables were neatly spread around, with even more seating divided into small wooden booths, which, despite taking up extra room, only served to make the place feel bigger. As the two made their way through, they observed the healthy scattering of 24 or so others, sitting amongst the tables and consuming a variety of food and drink. Most of them appeared quite wealthy, wearing well-kept tunics of some pleasant fabric, or large coats sporting gleaming buttons or some such accessory. As Aurora walked past them, with Zircon in tow, towards the tidy and stainless bar top, she couldn't help but feel a little bit out of place. "2 ales, please," she requested to the middle-aged, long-haired man standing behind the bar. 2 of your finest ales," Zircon gingerly piped up, a self-satisfied grin sweeping his face as he raised his finger in the air. Aurora looked at him worriedly. I'm not sure if we can afford to." "Nonsense," Zircon interrupted, beginning to search through his cloak's many pockets. "Surely I can spend a few coins on a fine drink for you. You've done so much to aid me after all." Zircon's gleeful attitude began to fade as his hands patted more and more of his pockets, turning quickly to one of confusion and then to outrage. "That woman must have stolen my coin purse," he exclaimed, putting his hands on his hips in exasperation. "This day just keeps getting worse and worse." As he spoke, the barman turned from his position by the taps and gently laid 2 large flagons filled with foaming liquid onto the counter. "2 of our finest," he said. "That'll be 2 silver pieces, if you please." Zircon grimaced at Aurora, lowering his head slightly in guilt. "You couldn't, get these, could you?" Aurora let out an exasperated sigh, hunching over as she reached into her pocket and withdrew her last 2 silver pieces. She stared at them in her palm for a moment, before closing her eyes, shaking her head, and handing them over to the expectant barkeep. "Thank you for your patronage," he grumbled. The 2 of them withdrew a stool each from underneath the lip of the bar, pulling them out and swivelling onto the flat round surface. Zircon, his guilt seeming to have faded entirely, gripped his flagon and began to sip it eagerly, commenting on the deliciousness of the beverage. Aurora took a small, tentative sip and nodded along with his words as she absent-mindedly watched her surroundings. "Excuse me, barman," Zircon called out, prompting the barkeep to turn his head. "I'm Zircon Littleworth. I'm not sure if you know me, but I own the old Barton place. I was just wondering, is it my primary holding or is it more of a holiday home for me? The barman narrowed his eyes and turned his head back to his work. I haven't got a clue. Well, you wouldn't happen to know my official title, would you? Zircon continued. Am I a duke or merely a viscount of some sort? This time, the barman did not bother with a response, instead shuffling his way down the length of the bar and tending to another customer on the far side. Rude, commented Zircon, giving the barman a sidelong glance as he raised the flagon and took a deep sip. So, what's our next move? Aurora asked him, still not having finished her drink. If we can't enter the manor, we've got nothing, and I'm all out of coin now. Yes, quite a conundrum, Zircon pondered, staring slightly upwards. I suppose we just have to keep looking for someone who knows me. After all, there's no way I could have lived here without being acquainted with anyone, right? Or, Aurora suggested, narrowing one eye as an idea began to form inside her head, we could try and find that woman who attacked you and figure out what happened back there. Zircon turned his head towards her as she did the same for him, an almost inquisitive expression painted on her face. But however would we do that? He asked, furrowing his brow. We have no assistance, no gold to her name, and no idea where she is. We could find her, Aurora posited. We could head back to the Flowering Blade. There was a strange creature with her. Between the two of them, I'm positive there must be some sort of trail. Zircon gave her an uncertain sideways glance. I don't know, he doubted. It doesn't seem very befitting of a nobleman to go romping around in the woods after some mysterious figure. Befitting be damned, said Aurora. We have an idea of where to look, and we have each other. Why shouldn't we find her? And if we do, questioned Zircon, what then? Aurora slammed her flagon onto the bar dramatically. Then we can find out what happened to your memories. I'm almost positive that strange gem had something to do with it. Maybe if we can get that, we could get you back to normal. Zircon's eyes began to widen as his head raised in thought. And we could get back my coin purse she stole. But wait, he paused, an uncertain expression suddenly pronouncing itself upon his previously confident face. I'm not sure I can do this. What if we fail? What if we find her and she bests us? I've no idea of my capabilities. Of course you can do this, Aurora started, twisting around in her seat to stare at him. I never thought I could assault a guardsman and flee my home, but look at me now. You did what? Exclaimed Zircon, spitting out his drink in alarm. You assaulted a guardsman? Aurora shook her head dismissively. Listen, what I'm trying to say is, you're capable of things you don't realise. Zircon stared at her with momentary concern, but eventually relented and let out a sigh. I don't know, he doubted again. What have I ever done that could make me prepared for this? Aurora's eyes wandered to the ceiling as she thought for a moment. Then a grin appeared on her face. Well, put it this way then, she began. Can you remember any times you tried something and then failed? Zircon shrugged. Well, I can't remember anything, so I guess not. Aurora beamed. Well, there you go. Zircon furrowed his brow and tilted his head to the side, staring at Aurora with a sidelong glance as his mouth opened slowly in thought. Then his eyes widened and he exclaimed, You're right. Maybe we can do this. Aurora joined him in his excitement. We can. She smiled at him and raised her flagon into the air. He smiled back, widely, and raised his own flagon to match it. Their drinking instruments clinked together, and they quickly downed the remainder of their ale before heading out into the unknown. Zircon and Aurora trudged through the woods as the sun disappeared far below the horizon, painting the sky an ever-darkening shade of blue. They had walked for hours up the road from Hillmaven, trudging once more the straight dirt path that had so long been the only safe passage between the town and its neighbours. When the sun had fully disappeared from view, and the fluorescent orange of its set had all but faded away, the two of them finally stopped, and Aurora set down the two threadbare bedrolls onto the cold earth. It was rough, uneven, and filled with a variety of small roots which would be far too much effort to pull up. Despite it, Aurora did not complain. Once the two thin bedrolls were laid out beside each other, the two split the last of the stale bread loaf they had subsisted on all evening and settled in. The dull grey fabric of their bedrolls was thin, only barely able to stave off the chill of the night air, and the poky ground below them offered little comfort to their backs. As the two lay in silence, shuffling around in futile attempts to attain comfort, Zircon addressed his companion. "I'm sorry I've dragged you all the way out here," he said. He tilted his head toward her and saw her staring upwards at the sky. An unexpected smile was planted on her face. "Don't be ridiculous," she told him, her gaze remaining still. "This is incredible." Zircon furrowed his brow confusedly, oblivious as to her reasoning. "What? I'd never left the walls of Tinvernet before now," Aurora explained, turning her impossibly warm smile towards him. "I was always so scared of leaving, of what it would be like out here. I just spent every week making sure I could pay the rent so I could stay safe in my house. I couldn't have imagined being out here without a home to go back to. And yet, now that I'm out here, it's the greatest feeling. I feel alive and brave and like I have nothing to fear anymore." Zircon didn't feel brave. He felt cold and uncomfortable. He had no memories of his former life, but this situation still felt all too familiar, as if he had lived it 100 times before, old and upsetting, like a wound that could not quite heal. "Just look at the stars," Aurora told him, her gaze having already returned to the night sky. Zircon obeyed, tilting his head back upwards towards the great sheet of light and dark above them. The sky was filled with stars, numerous beyond understanding, and cloudy nebulas desaturated over the great distance. They strung together like raindrops on an invisible web, so still and yet so filled with wonder. At first, Zircon could see little more than a chaotic lump of lights, devoid of value and warmth. But as he looked again to Aurora's face, alive with beauty, her wonder gave way to his, and he looked to the stars again, with eyes not quite belonging to him, or at least not the version of himself he felt used to. All of a sudden, the chill of the night seemed to be that little bit less inescapable, and the dark trees all around him, rustling in the quiet breeze that swept the land, didn't evoke fear nor uncertainty. They invoked life. "I suppose you do have a point," Zircon admitted, allowing a slight smile to rise on his lips. For a moment, the two turned their heads towards each other, and their eyes met with a spark of joy quite unfamiliar to them both. "So you don't have to be sorry," Aurora restated. "You dragging me out here is the best thing that ever happened to me." The discomfort of the night fast receding, the pair quickly fell into a deep slumber underneath the cover of the great night sky.